It took me 4 decades of living, failing, winning, losing everything, rebuilding, and pushing past my own limits to truly understand what I'm about to share with you. And if you really hear this, not just with your ears, but with your body and your decisions, it can save you years of pain, confusion, and struggle. Most people think their life is controlled by their circumstances. They believe it's the economy, their parents, their past, their education, their luck, or their lack of opportunity that decides how far they'll go. That belief alone has destroyed more potential than any failure ever could, because the truth is simple, but not easy. Your life is shaped by what you consistently do, not by what you intend to do. For years, I thought knowledge was power. I read books, listened to tapes, attended seminars, and collected ideas like trophies. But nothing changed. Why? Because knowledge is not power. Knowledge is only potential power. Action is power, and not random action, consistent action driven by emotional commitment. Here's what took me years to learn. People don't change because they understand something. They change because they associate massive pain with staying the same or massive pleasure with changing. Until that moment happens, nothing truly shifts. You can want success, health, confidence, or freedom all you want, but if the pain of change feels greater than the pain of staying where you are, you'll stay stuck. Most people are addicted to their problems, not because they enjoy suffering, but because the familiar feels safer than the unknown. Your brain's job is not to make you happy, it's to keep you alive. And it will fight change even when change is exactly what you need. So if you want a different life, you must change what you demand of yourself. Not someday, not next year. Now, another lesson that took decades to understand is this: it's not the events of your life that shape you, it's the meaning you give them. Two people can go through the same experience. One becomes bitter, the other becomes better. The difference is never the event, it's the story they tell themselves afterward. If you believe failure means, I'm not enough, you'll quit. If you believe failure means, this is feedback, you'll grow. Life is always giving you feedback, but most people take it personally instead of using it strategically. You don't get what you want in life, you get who you are. Your identity, what you believe you are capable of, will always control your behavior. If you see yourself as someone who tries, you'll try. If you see yourself as someone who finishes, you'll find a way. Change your identity and your behavior follows automatically. For years, I thought motivation was something you either had or didn't have. That's a lie. Motivation is built. It comes from progress, and progress comes from standards. When you raise your standards, what you will and will not accept, your life changes instantly. Decide right now what you will no longer tolerate, not someday, today. Because the quality of your life is the quality of your standards. Another hard truth: success is not about what you get, it's about who you become. You can lose money and make it back. You can lose a relationship and rebuild love. But the person you become in the process, that's the real reward. If you chase results without growth, you'll feel empty even when you win. Fulfillment doesn't come from achievement alone. It comes from progress, contribution, and meaning. People who live only for themselves feel empty. People who live for something larger than themselves feel alive. When you focus on serving, your problems shrink and your energy expands. One of the biggest breakthroughs of my life was realizing that emotions are not random. They are signals. When you feel frustrated, it's because you believe something should be different. When you feel fear, it's because you're focused on loss instead of growth. Change your focus and you change your emotional state. Your focus determines your reality. Whatever you consistently focus on, you feel. And whatever you feel, you act upon. If you focus on what you lack, you'll feel empty. If you focus on what you have and what you can give, you'll feel powerful. Time is not your most valuable resource. Energy is. And what drains your energy the most is living out of alignment with who you know you could be. Every day you settle, you lose a little bit of yourself. Here's something that took me decades to accept: you don't need more time, more money, or more confidence. You need a decision, a real decision, not a preference, not a wish, a decision that cuts off all other options. The moment you decide, your brain starts looking for ways instead of excuses. Most people spend their lives negotiating with themselves. Winners decide once and move forward. And finally, the most important lesson of all: your past does not equal your future. No matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done or failed to do, this moment is a new beginning if you choose to make it one. You are not your story. You are the author. And you can write a new chapter starting right now. If you remember nothing else, remember this: change happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. Make the decision today to raise your standards, change your story, and step into the life you know you're capable of living, because the life you want is not waiting for someday. It's waiting for a decision. Your life is shaped by what you consistently do, not by what you intend to do. Most people live in the gap between intention and action, believing that wanting something badly enough will eventually make it happen. They talk about what they're going to do, who they're going to become, and how everything will change someday, yet their daily behaviors remain the same. Intention feels good because it gives the illusion of progress, but without action it changes nothing. The body, the mind, and the nervous system only respond to what you repeatedly practice, not to what you hope will happen in the future. Consistency is the real difference between people who create extraordinary lives and those who stay stuck repeating the same year over and over. Small actions done daily have more power than massive actions done occasionally. It's not what you do once in a burst of motivation that defines you. It's what you do when you're tired, distracted, uncertain, or afraid. Your habits are always shaping your future, whether you're conscious of them or not. Every choice is a vote for the person you are becoming. Many people overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can do in a year through consistent effort. They look for breakthroughs instead of building rituals. They wait to feel confident before acting, not realizing that confidence is built through action. You don't become consistent because you're motivated. You become motivated because you've been consistent. Momentum is created after you start, not before. Your environment also reinforces consistency. If your surroundings make the wrong actions easy and the right actions difficult, willpower will always lose. Success is rarely about self-control. It's about designing your life so the behaviors you want become automatic. What you see, hear, and interact with every day quietly programs your standards and expectations. Emotions play a powerful role in what you repeat. Whatever behavior you link to pleasure will grow stronger, and whatever behavior you link to pain will fade. If you associate discipline with deprivation, you'll resist it. If you associate it with freedom, pride, and self-respect, it becomes natural. Repetition plus emotion creates belief, and belief drives behavior without effort. Over time, these repeated actions form your identity. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. The story you tell yourself about who you are is built from evidence, and that evidence comes from what you do consistently. Each small action may seem insignificant, but together they create a pattern that determines your results in health, relationships, confidence, and success. Change happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. Human beings are wired to avoid discomfort, and that wiring keeps most people locked in patterns they no longer want. Even when a situation is painful, familiar pain often feels safer than unfamiliar effort. The mind says, at least I know how this feels, at least I can survive this. So people stay in jobs that drain them, relationships that limit them, habits that weaken them, not because they don't want more, but because the cost of change feels too uncertain. For a long time, people believe they can tolerate just a little more frustration, a little more regret, a little more self-betrayal. That tolerance slowly becomes a standard. What once felt unacceptable becomes normal, and what becomes normal becomes permanent unless something disrupts it. This is why real change often follows moments of crisis, because crisis forces the mind to confront a new level of pain that can no longer be justified or ignored. Pain itself is not the enemy. Pain is a signal. It is feedback telling you that something is out of alignment with who you are or who you want to become. The problem is not pain, the problem is what you do with it. Some people let pain weaken them, others let it wake them up. The difference lies in meaning. If pain means failure, you shut down. If pain means growth, you step forward. Change requires leverage. You must build reasons so strong that staying the same becomes more painful than taking action. This means vividly associating pain with your current path and vividly associating pleasure with the future you want. When you emotionally feel the long-term cost of inaction, procrastination loses its grip. When you emotionally feel the rewards of change, effort feels lighter. Most people wait for external pressure to force them to change. They wait for circumstances, deadlines, or disasters. But lasting transformation happens when you create that pressure internally. You decide that enough is enough, that you will no longer negotiate with yourself. This decision shifts your nervous system from hesitation into action. Once the pain of staying the same is clear, action becomes simpler. Fear doesn't disappear, but it stops controlling you. The discomfort of change becomes a price you are willing to pay because the alternative is no longer acceptable. At that point, change stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like self-respect. It's not the events of your life that shape you, but the meaning you give them. Two people can experience the same setback, the same loss, or the same failure and walk away with completely different futures. One becomes defined by it, the other uses it as fuel. The event itself has no power until your mind assigns it a story. That story becomes the lens through which you see yourself, others, and what's possible for your life. Most suffering doesn't come from what happens, it comes from what we tell ourselves about what happened. A rejection becomes proof that you're not enough. A mistake becomes evidence that you always fail. A delay becomes a sign that life is against you. These interpretations feel real, but they are habits of thought, not facts. Once a meaning is repeated enough times, it becomes a belief. And beliefs quietly shape every decision you make. Meaning determines emotion, emotion determines action. If you label an experience as a disaster, you'll feel defeated and act small. If you label it as feedback, you'll feel curious and take action. Nothing about the event changes, only the internal interpretation. This is why control over meaning is one of the most powerful skills a human being can develop. Many people unknowingly use the past as a prison. They replay old moments and attach limiting meanings to them, then live as if those meanings are permanent truths. They say things like, this is just who I am, this always happens to me, or people like me don't succeed. These meanings turn temporary experiences into lifelong identities. Changing meaning does not require denying reality. It requires choosing an empowering interpretation. You can acknowledge pain without letting it define you. You can recognize loss without turning it into hopelessness. When you consciously ask, what else could this mean, you open the door to growth. A failure can mean you need a new strategy. A betrayal can mean you now value your boundaries. A challenge can mean you're being prepared for something greater. The meanings you choose also shape your future expectations. If you believe struggle means you're on the wrong path, you'll quit too early. If you believe struggle means you're stretching beyond your limits, you'll persist longer. Over time, these meanings accumulate and create your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who survives, learns, adapts, and rises, or as someone who is unlucky, broken, or stuck. Life keeps presenting events, but the story you attach to them determines who you become. Your identity controls your behavior, and your behavior controls your results. What you believe about who you are quietly dictates what you attempt, what you avoid, and what you tolerate. Identity is not something you are born with. It is something you build through repeated experiences and reinforced beliefs. Every action you take becomes evidence for the story you tell yourself about who you are, and over time that story begins to feel permanent. Most people try to change their results without changing their identity. They set goals, make plans, and gather information, yet their behavior keeps pulling them back to familiar outcomes. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will find reasons to struggle. If you see yourself as someone who quits, you will quit when pressure rises. The mind will always work to stay consistent with your identity, even when that identity is limiting. Behavior is the bridge between identity and results. You don't act randomly, you act in ways that feel congruent with who you believe you are. This is why willpower alone rarely lasts. You can force yourself to behave differently for a short time, but if the behavior conflicts with your identity, it creates internal resistance. Eventually, the old identity wins and pulls you back to old habits. To create lasting change, identity must shift first. This shift does not come from affirmations alone. It comes from new evidence. When you repeatedly do something that aligns with a stronger version of yourself, the mind begins to update its self-image. Small wins matter because they provide proof. Each consistent action becomes a vote for a new identity. Language plays a powerful role in identity. The words you use to describe yourself reinforce who you believe you are. Saying I am bad at this locks the behavior in place. Saying I am learning creates flexibility. Identity statements are commands to the nervous system. They tell your brain what patterns to strengthen and what patterns to ignore. Your standards are also expressions of identity. What you accept in your life is a reflection of what you believe you deserve. When you raise your standards, you are declaring a new identity, someone who values themselves differently. That declaration initially feels uncomfortable because it challenges the old self-image, but discomfort is a sign of growth, not danger. As identity evolves, behavior naturally follows. Actions that once required effort begin to feel normal. Choices that once felt impossible become obvious. Results change not because you force them to, but because you are no longer the same person making the decisions. When you change who you believe you are, you automatically change what you do, and over time the external results reshape to match the internal shift. Raise your standards and your life changes instantly. Standards are the invisible rules you live by, the boundaries that determine what you will accept and what you will no longer tolerate. They shape your choices far more powerfully than your goals. Goals point you in a direction, but standards decide how you behave when things get difficult. You don't rise to your hopes, you fall to your standards every single time. Many people confuse standards with wishes. They say they want better health, stronger relationships, or greater success, yet they continue to tolerate behaviors that contradict those desires. What you tolerate becomes your reality. When you allow disrespect, inconsistency, or self-neglect, you teach your nervous system that this is acceptable. Over time, tolerance turns into identity, and identity locks in results. Raising standards is not about perfection, it is about non-negotiables. It is a clear decision about how you will treat yourself and how you will allow others to treat you. The moment you change what you accept, your behavior must change to match it. This is why standards create immediate shifts. You may not see results instantly, but your actions change the moment your standards do. Standards are reinforced by emotional intensity. If you casually decide to eat better or work harder, old habits will pull you back. But when you associate strong emotion with your standards, pride, self-respect, or even disgust with your old behavior, change becomes sustainable. Emotion fuels commitment, and commitment fuels consistency. Most people set standards based on their past instead of their potential. They lower expectations to avoid disappointment. But lowering standards does not protect you from pain, it guarantees it. High standards do not mean life will be easy. They mean life will be meaningful. They push you to grow into a stronger version of yourself. Your environment either supports or undermines your standards. If you surround yourself with people who normalize mediocrity, your standards will slowly drop. If you surround yourself with people who demand excellence, your standards rise naturally. This is not about comparison, it is about exposure. You become what you consistently see as normal. Raising standards also requires honesty. You must tell the truth about where you are and why you are there. Blame weakens standards because it gives away control. Responsibility strengthens standards because it returns power to you. When you decide that your life is your responsibility, your standards rise automatically. As standards rise, identity follows. You begin to see yourself as someone who keeps promises to themselves, someone who does not settle, someone who acts with intention. From that identity, better choices become natural. Discipline feels less like force, and progress becomes a reflection of who you are becoming rather than something you are chasing. A real decision cuts off all excuses and creates a new future. A real decision cuts off all excuses and creates a new future. Most people think they have decided when in reality they have only expressed a preference. A preference leaves room for negotiation, for hesitation, for backing out when things get uncomfortable. A decision is different. A decision means the door behind you is closed. There is no debate with yourself, no emotional bargaining, no waiting to see how you feel tomorrow. Once a true decision is made, your identity begins to reorganize around it. Excuses exist only when commitment is weak. The moment you fully decide, excuses lose their power because they no longer serve a purpose. The mind stops asking if you should act and starts asking how you will act. This shift is subtle but powerful. Energy that was once spent justifying an action is redirected into problem solving. Obstacles are no longer signs to stop, they are signals to adapt. Indecision is exhausting. It drains mental and emotional energy because you are constantly weighing options, doubting yourself, and replaying the same internal arguments. A decision simplifies life. It removes noise. When you decide, you free your mind from endless loops of uncertainty. Clarity replaces confusion and focus replaces anxiety. A real decision also changes your standards. You no longer allow behaviors that contradict what you have chosen. This is why decisions feel uncomfortable at first. They demand alignment. If your actions do not match your decision, internal tension appears. That tension is not a problem, it is guidance. It pushes you to either raise your behavior or lower your decision. Growth happens when you raise your behavior. Many people wait for confidence before deciding, but confidence is a result, not a requirement. Deciding first is what builds confidence over time. Each aligned action becomes evidence that you are capable, reliable, and committed. That evidence strengthens belief, and belief strengthens action. Decisions also shape your future identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who does not retreat under pressure. This self-image becomes self-reinforcing. The more you act in alignment with your decisions, the more natural that behavior feels. Fear often shows up after a decision, not before. This surprises people. They think fear means they chose wrong, when in reality fear often means the decision matters. Fear is simply the nervous system adjusting to a new standard. When you act anyway, fear loses intensity. A decision does not guarantee an easy path, but it guarantees movement. Movement creates feedback. Feedback creates learning, and learning creates progress. A future is not created by hope or intention. It is created by decisive action repeated over time. The moment you decide, you step onto a new path, and the path begins to shape you in return.